Welcome to Politics, where we prepare you for your next political conversation. I'm Jeronimo Cortina, a political science professor at the University of Houston.
And I'm Brandon Rottinghaus, also a political science professor here at the University of Houston. We're going to take a little bit of a pause in terms of our normal discussion about the week's chaos and instead talk about a different chaos.
All right.
That's the chaos to watch in the future. We're going to split our discussion about what races to watch in the primary season in Texas. As we've been hinting in the last few weeks, there's a lot of things happening, a lot of races that are interesting and very telling for the future of the state. We're going to highlight the Democrats this time, and after the break, we'll talk about the Republicans. So you can use these as a little guide to think about what the political world's going to look like come March, because it'll be here before you know it, my friend.
I know.
Let's talk about general things in terms of how the landscape looks in Texas politics for Democrats.
Well, good, bad, ugly, positive, negative, everything above.
You can kind of twist it in a way to see kind of what you want. Yeah, like it's like a abstract art, right? Like some people see like, oh, it's a person. Some people see, well, it's obviously a dog.
Right.
Well,
right.
But you can see some good things and some bad things.
Yeah. So I think, in terms of looking for the positive side is midterm election, Trump presidency, very polarizing, the economy not doing as it's supposed to be doing, inflation still lurking around, prices.
Like the Grinch.
Exactly.
Right?
I love the Grinch.
Always around.
Those little things that could make it very complicated, very controversial, especially after President Trump has said this issue of affordability is a hoax created by Democrats, something that the general public and voters would say like, wait, what?
Yeah, and also like members of his White House staff saying, wait a minute, how are you going to set the Republicans up for success? Trump is the linchpin, right? He is the thing that makes the Republican Party spin. And as a result, they need him to be on message. But the fact that he's blaming Democrats for this and the fact that the American people blame him and the administration for the fact that the prices are so bad and the economy is kind of in the tank means that Democrats have got a chance, right?
Right. And you cannot win this midterm election by blaming the Biden administration. I mean, it's...
Right. Who again?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Joe Biden has been basically absent from the scene, and probably for good for Democrats, right? He was definitely a drag on the ticket in 2024, and the fact that, he had to drop out is a pretty good indication that, like, he's not welcome around these parts, even at Christmas time. So I do think you're right that there is a kind of flaw for Democrats, wherein they're still looking for that kind of national leader to really energize things. There are potential spots here for Democrats. Some candidates in some of these races definitely are going to be the kind of future of the party. They may not win this time. Maybe they'll run again. Maybe they can raise money and at least show that there's sort of proof of concept here. But we've been in this position before. Jeronimo, we've seen this Christmas movie before. How many movies are there about Santa Claus? Like 9,000. And Democrats have had this narrative repeated a lot. That is, it's a good moment for them nationally. They've got good candidates. They raise just boatloads of money. And then all of a sudden, their stocking is full of coal at the end of the cycle. Like, how do you see that narrative playing out? How do they overcome the idea that they are perpetually underrepresented in Texas?
Well, they just have to do their homework. I mean, and it's a matter that needs to happen every single day of every single year, whether there is an election or there's not an election, right? Republicans have done so, right? It's little by little, election by election, so on and so forth. So it's a matter to see if that's going to be. Certainly, the Trump presidency is not going to hand out a win for Democrats. It helps, but it has to have the right message, the right candidate, and the right efforts, and of course, the right amount of money.
Yeah, and Democrats found out the hard way in 2024 that like running against Trump is not sufficient, right? Necessary, but not sufficient. So there's more to be said. And I think one of the ways that we've seen that very true is in South Texas. The Latino vote in Texas is the biggest swing vote.
Yep.
1 in 4 primary voters is Latino, but about 20% of Latino voters across most polls are kind of undecided at this point among different candidates. So what that means is that although Republicans are making gains in South Texas, it's still the case that this is the Democrats' area to lose. So what do you think about the way that this has unfolded? Can the Democrats create a statewide coalition that includes the Latino vote?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think that if Latino voters, or if Democrats focus on issues of affordability, on issues of the economy, on issues of jobs, on issues of healthcare, and highlight the deficiencies that we have in our system, then they can be successful, right? Okay. And again, you don't need all Latino voters, right? Yeah. You need a significant coalition that is going to allow you to pass post.
You need that successful 60-40 split, and if you can manage it, the 70-30 split. That's been the sweet spot for Democrats, but it's been harder to come by, and it's going to be even more hard to come by as the messaging internally becomes much more complicated. So one other consideration for Democrats is that they're still fighting these internal ideological battles about who's a better candidate. Should we go in the progressive direction and have somebody who excites the base? Should we elect somebody who is a moderate who can appeal to swing voters in a general election? That debate we're seeing played out in a bunch of different ways, and we'll talk about that in some of these races. But the fact is that if you look at the history of this, moderates have fared pretty well in these fights. You can look at Allred over Gutierrez, Hager versus West and Sassoon Ramirez. You have Sadler in 12, Tony Sanchez even over Dan Morales, who neither of them were particularly ideologically committed or liberal, but in 2002, that was something that definitely was where moderates won. So with the exception of Lupe Valdez over Andrew White in 2018, basically, progressives haven't had that much of a purchase here. That's changing to some degree because the party is changing, but it's also the case that internally, Democrats still aren't sure kind of what that line looks like.
Well, but these candidates are going to be different, right? You have very progressive candidates in the Senate race. Yeah. Also progressive candidates in the governor's race that we're going to talk about in just a second. Yeah. So it's a different kind of candidate that we'll see. And we have never tested them, to put it that way, in these elections.
It's a great point. Let's leapfrog over the Senate race for Dems because we talked about that last week, and we're definitely going to spend a lot of time talking about it. I had a friend text me saying basically so is every day going to be a Tallarico Crockett story? Right. And I think the short answer is yes. Yeah. Let's leapfrog over that and talk about some races that we don't get a chance to talk about as much. Let's first talk about the governor primary. Now, again, we're talking just about Democrats. Right. We'll talk about Republicans in a couple weeks. Let's talk about what the landscape looks like for the governor's race in Texas for Democrats.
All right. So we have State Representative Gina Hinojosa. Then we have Andrew White. Then we have former U.S. Representative Chris Bell and Bobby Cole, and then Patricia Abrego, Angela Villescaz, and Jose Navarro. So who are these folks? So, and what are they doing?
Yes. Why are they all on my ballot?
Right. So Gina Hinojosa, she's an Austin Democrat. She is focusing her campaign based on fighting corruption. She's one of the most progressive members of the House of Representatives here in Texas. She served as Austin School Board president and is firebrand in terms of these, I would say, progressive politics. Andrew White, so it's a Houston businessman. He's the son of late Governor Mark White. He's running as an independent Democrat, more moderate, and making, this, I guess, argument that he's more electable in a general election. Former U.S. Representative Chris Bell is second run for governor, and he's a Houston attorney. He also ran in the Democratic primary to challenge Cornyn in 2020. And then the other one is Bobby Cole, as long as the information that we have. He's a former firefighter, he's a farmer, and he's also arguing that there needs to be more working people running government. So
this race certainly has developed a top cycle. I think, Hinojosa probably is the one to beat. She's the one who's most visible. She's going to raise the most money. She's obviously the daughter of Gilberto Hinojosa, who was a former party chair. She's known in these circles. I like the fact that she's running as a progressive Democrat on an education issue. I think that that's a winnable story for Democrats. Like, there's a lot of consternation about the way education policy has been handled in the state, and so I think that's a kind of comparative advantage for her. You can see lots of ways that might unfold, but again, she's very progressive in a way that is something that she can challenge, that she can be challenged on. And it's also the case that people seem to like the way that the education system is going in Texas. There's a support for vouchers, which is really the cornerstone of Greg Abbott's kind of sort of education policy, and maybe for his entire governorship. Andrew White, is kind of an incrementalist. He's a policy tinkerer. He's a bit more moderate, right? On abortion, he's pro-life, but wants to veto restrictions. He's against recreational marijuana, but supports decriminalization. He's presenting himself as a kind of, again, as we said in this debate, like a more moderate, somebody who can appeal to the crossover voters. There's still serious debate about how this might function. She's definitely better among the base. He's probably better among leaning voters, but leaning voters don't vote as often and as kind of powerfully, as vociferously. So there's definitely going to be this fight here. Chris Bell, I'm not sure yet, right? I mean, I get press releases from Chris Bell, or he'll kind of chip away at an issue or something, but you don't see a lot of attention to him. And so maybe some debates will kind of tease this out, but they've all kind of picked their lane to some degree. For Hinojosa, her lane is definitely the progressive lane. And honestly, as we said, there's this sort of movement now where Democrats are fired up. They don't like Donald Trump. They want to see some real fight. And she's the one who probably presents that most effectively. So, again, we'll see, but this is sort of typical, I think, of that fight that the Democrats are trying to kind of tease out. Really, the question here is money, because Greg Abbott has about $90 million. Now, he's going to spend that across the state, but I'm sure he'll spend a little bit of that on himself to pursue a victory, and that's a big chunk of change. The other is, just can Latino outreach be successful? As you said, Hinojosa's from the Valley. She's good at connecting to these voters. That seems to me to be an opportunity for Democrats to really kind of set that stage. So there's lots to be able to tease out. Let's talk about the Attorney General's race. Ken Paxton is vacating to run for Senate. We'll talk about that, of course, because that's going to be one of the marquee races. So for the first time in a decade, there's basically an open seat
primary
for the AG's office. Paxton has really redefined the office of Attorney General. And so in his wake will be this question about what the Attorney General's office is supposed to do. Democrats are saying, let's get back to basics, right? Let's focus on the stuff that the Attorney General should do and not on the kind of political, roustabouts that the Attorney General currently is doing. So they want to pitch basically a new way of approaching this and to create these sort of platforms that make the office more like it was designed to be. What do you make of that just generally in terms of how the office is seen? Is the public that worried about the AG's kind of dalliances or these Don Quixote-like fights, or are they just kind of ignoring the office altogether?
Well, let me give it a real think. No.
No. Most people don't realize that there even is an Attorney General's office, but it's important. They do a ton of work.
It is absolutely important for 11,000 billion things, right, that have very important implications in terms of what city governments are allowed to do, in terms of what county governments are allowed to do. But I mean, over the past years, and I would say this is a trend that started perhaps with Governor Abbott in terms of suing federal administration. In his case, it was the administration. And it's a trend that has been going over and over and over. And the question is, yes, indeed, that is a role that attorney generals in the U.S. play. Why? Because we live in a federal system. And the balance of powers and everything that is not allowed based on the 10th Amendment, that is not given to the national government, is left to the states and to the people. So they should play a role in that 100%. The question is if the Attorney General's office should be, just like, oh, you move your cup, I'm going to sue you.
Suing you,
and then also the inner state control in terms of rightfully elected local governments,
Right.
whether it's one party or the other.
Yes.
That's another very important issue in terms of governance.
It's a great question.
And
yeah.
how sometimes these municipalities and cities are tied
Yeah.
and they cannot do a lot of stuff because the Attorney General's office does not allow them.
There's not enough academic work on attorneys general.
Yeah.
There's a little, but there definitely is a new phase where attorneys general across the country, including and frankly led by Ken Paxton, are doing a lot more of these sort of in things to kind of cement their own political perspective, but also as a legal question, giving the states these powers. So it's really interesting. But let's talk about the Dems though, because this is a fight that it definitely could be pretty strong. You've got two notable candidates. State Senator Nathan Johnson from the Dallas area is emphasizing kind of professionalization of the office, wanting to reduce outside counsel contracts, which, as you said, for Ken Paxton, he's suing everybody, so you got to have a bunch more lawyers. They're definitely getting rich. Build in-house capacity with attorneys and shift the focus from political litigation to more of a legal service delivery. And then Joe Jaworski, who's a former Galveston mayor, he's run before for Attorney General. He emphasizes some basic things like open records, child support enforcement, which the AG's office does, by law, nonpartisan administration, and he says to enforce the high school voter registration law, which you may remember. I spent a lot of time studying. That's something no one talks about, but just as a little snippet, basically Texas state law says that the high schools in Texas have to offer high school registration to people who are eligible twice a year. Almost no schools do it. We've done a couple studies of this with our undergraduates and found there's a real lacking here. And not surprisingly, young people aren't voting. They're probably not voting because they don't have access to these pathways.
Right.
So this is something that I think is a really good thing. So both of them seem pretty competent. I don't think there's any real ideological differences here. They're both well known, like I said, kind of in Democratic circles. I'm not sure who's got the edge here, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't know either. And also it's very technical issues in terms of what they want to do eventually.
Yeah, like does this sell to voters? They will look to a back to basics. Let's prioritize in-house counsel over external counsel. I mean, it's cheaper. I guess you could make that case.
Sure, but I guess at the end it's going to be also how they sell or how they argue against the politicization of the Attorney General's office, right? Or what they're going to do in terms of changing it or whatever it is that they're going to do.
Yeah.
So I think that eventually is going to be have this partisan angle, but it's too early so far.
Yeah, we'll wait and see. Let's talk about some more local races for the U.S. House of Representatives. Congressional District 18 has been one that's been shifting around. One thing we noted earlier is that basically redistricting has created lots of different moving chairs. You've got incumbents retiring. Sometimes they're shifting around. Here's an example of incumbents shifting around. Al Green, who forever has represented the 9th District, is going to run in the 18th District, but not so fast. There's actually more people running, right?
Yes.
You've got Amanda Edwards, who's likely to run for this seat. You've got Christian Menefee, who's going to run for this seat. They're actually fixed in a battle to run for the remainder of Sylvester Turner's term in the old 18th District.
Yes.
This is for the new 18th District. So you've got three pretty notable Democrats, two of whom have run races before, literally in the same space. You've got Al Green, who's been in Congress for a long, long time. So how is this going to shake out? A real kind of pitched battle inside the Democratic Party.
Oh, yeah, it is. Basically, you're putting very important figures in terms of local politics against each other.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a redefinition of where the Democratic Party, I think, is going to go at least at the local level, right? Going with, the proved leadership of Green that has been representing that area of the city for many, 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 many decades.
Yeah.
And then you have these new up-and-coming maybe half their age of Al Green, trying to say, okay, it's time.
Time to step aside. Yeah.
Right, it's time to step aside. And remember when Sylvester Turner was elected, he said, I'm just going to serve a little bit and then I'm going to pass the baton, right?
And he's going to pass it to Al Green, who's older than Turner, has been in Congress for longer.
So it's one of these issues that we're going to see, right?
Yeah, I like the way you put that. Like, it's a real generational battle,
Exactly.
right? I mean, young versus old. And that's something we've seen in different phases of the Democratic Party primaries, but this one is very much in the face. And the question here connected to that is sort of who gets the edge? And I think to some degree, Al Green is still in really good space. Like, he is a well-known Democrat, so the people who are now in a new district are going to have to make a decision about somebody that two people they don't know that well, one person that they do know really well. There's a chance that could give an edge to Green. The other is that it's about who votes, right? And this is a turnout race where older people vote and they know Al Green and they trust him. So there's another possibility here that happens. So it's very conceivable this goes to a runoff. And if it goes to a runoff, then I think we'll see that kind of condensed together. But that's the real question, is whether Al Green's name ID and experience is enough to overcome the younger challengers who see a kind of new vision. It's unknown, but definitely of interest, all mixed together with the, wicked brew of redistricting and a bunch of new voters. And so it's going to be an expensive proposition and one that's going to flood our inboxes with a bunch of mail pieces. But let's keep talking about Congress and move to North Texas, and that's Congressional District 33. Now, again, all these districts are basically new. This is a district that is basically part of the old 23, but now is kind of reformed. Julie Johnson is going to run for this office. She's a member of Congress from the 32nd District, but now she's living in the new district, so she's running for that. But you've got a surprise, and that is that Colin Allred, who was running for Senate, but dropped out after Jasmine Crockett jumped in to be able to run for this seat. So he's now saying, well, basically the 33 is really like the 32nd that I used to represent, so it's new, but it's really old. What do you make of this? Again, kind of getting chippy early on. What do you think about this?
Well, again, it's this internal fight, and you're putting cousins against cousins, and and it's like you putting what is that movie, the Hunger Games? Yes. You put the weapons.
You got to get to your weapon,
right?
That's a great point.
and try to see who's gonna have the winning punch. Yeah. And I mean, Julie Johnson and also Albert are good representatives. They care about the constituents, and it's one of the byproducts of redistricting.
That is exactly what it is too. Yeah, like the chaos of this is really what Republicans are gaining as a side product of like the addition to picking up seats, right, with the redistricting. Now they've got this chaos they're sowing inside the Democrats' house. It's gotten chippy, like I said. You've got pointed language from Julie Johnson that says that women should never be treated as placeholders for men who fail to advance. Yikes. And you've got Allred who punches back saying, well, this majority-minority district needs a real fighter. So both of them are edging around this fight. Jab, jab. We'll see if anybody can land a haymaker, but this will be another race to watch because, again, it tells us something about where the party's going. Let's return back to Harris County. Let's talk about the judge race, right? Lita Hidalgo's leaving, and this leaves Harris County open as a judge position. This is interesting because, as we said before, this is a race that is in a county that's pretty purple. Republicans are hoping to make a stand here. Greg Abbott's pledged to spend a bunch of money, but it's obviously pretty fertile Democratic territory. Elise Parker is running for this seat, former mayor. She enters as probably the best-known figure. Leticia Plummer, who's a former member of city council, has got a kind of progressive energy she's bringing to it. So there's a lot that could be played out here. Older Democrats versus younger Democrats, progressives versus moderates. What do you think?
Well, I mean, once again, it's going to be depending on what's going to be this difference in terms of how they approach this issue and how they either stay in Hidalgo's policy or separate from it. So
because those voters are still there, and those are probably more naturally Plummer voters, depending on how the messaging plays out. But Mayor Parker's definitely really well liked in that space too. So there's like going to be competition for those votes, for Hidalgo's voters.
Right. But then if Plummer wins, what's the likelihood that she can reach out to more moderate voters, right? Remember, Harris County judge is a position in which you are the county administrator and you are basically the shepherd of commissioners' courts. Yeah. So it is a administrative position, very public policy. It's like, we have a hole, then, we need to cover the hole, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then, right, it is the political part. So how you can navigate that world is going to depend how you can basically be likely. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, Plummer's themes have been about strengthening the healthcare system, especially Harris Health, expanding county contracts, and focus on green energy, attention to ICE and cooperation limits, finding a way to kind of make that balance that, doesn't violate the law, but that definitely respects kind of the sort of progressive view of things. So she has, I think, potential policy operations in that space, but obviously Mayor Parker can lean on her experience, right?
Yep.
Literally running a city and have that be potentially a big factor. Interesting. Yeah, we'll see that race because that's going to be a big determination of kind of whether or not the Democrats have a candidate who can win in November and beat the Republicans who also have got a pretty sizable field. Last thing, let's talk about Tarrant County. Tarrant County is a weird one because it just very recently became kind of a big purple county. I talked about Harris is that way, but Tarrant's really very swingy. Tim O'Hare, who's the current incumbent Republican judge, won by only about 5 to 6 percentage points. So it's Republican leaning, but definitely is swingy. And in this case, you've got Alicia Simmons, who's a former commissioner who has butted heads with Tim O'Hare, and a late-breaking entry, Mark Veasley, who is a member of Congress, decided because he's not in his district anymore, he is going to run for county judge. This is a wild card to me, and again, internally, there's going to be a pretty serious fight, but does reflect the fact that you're seeing this churn.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be very interesting because Tarrant County is, as you say, recently purple, is going to be a very competitive race.
If Democrats can juice up turnout there, there's a potential that success breeds like some support up ballot.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is it for before the break. We wish you happy holidays. And when we come back, we're going to do the same thing, but for Republican candidates. I'm Jeronimo Cortina.
And I'm Brad Rottinghaus. We'll see you after the break.